If you're like me, you probably started a lot of knitting projects in the spring and now you've set them all aside because the warmer weather came. In today's video, I'm going to talk about tackling some of the lingering works in progress that I have left over mostly from the spring, but a couple from the summer as well. Hi everyone, welcome to Musing Maker. I'm Harriet and I've been a knitter and crocheter for over 40 years now, and this channel is where I come to talk about my various challenges and works in progress that I get up to in the fiber arts. So a disclaimer just right at the outset, right? The number of works in progress that we're each comfortable with as a knitter or crocheter or fiber artist is, very specific to the individual. So some people don't mind having tons of works in progress. Other people really only want to work on one project at a time. Well, I would say that I fall somewhere in between the two. And I kind of wonder sometimes whether a lot of us fall somewhere in between those two things, right? So for me, having 40 works in progress would begin to cause me some anxiety. And if you've watched some of the videos out there on YouTube of people working through having large works in progress sort of accumulations, right? So I'm thinking of Yana from Finnish Knitting Stories, or I think even Amber from Lovely Yarn have all talked about having quite a few works in progress. And Roxanne Richardson has confessed that she herself ended up in this bind at one point, and that's why she hosts every year. She hosts Finish It February, where you sort of focus in on finishing your works in progress. Okay, so one of the things that I do to keep the number of works in progress that I have on the go somewhat manageable is to make sure that I have a particular place where I'm keeping track of them. And for me, the place that's worked best so far has been Ravelry. And I haven't been using Ravelry in that way for very long, so that might be why it's working for me. I have also tried having a spreadsheet. That didn't work. I think that in the past, I used to simply have my bags and boxes and, kind of various stash of works in progress in closets and various places around the house. And so as I've kind of gotten more organized with my knitting, I tried to eliminate that. And I would say that in the past, one of the downsides of just sort of starting works in progress and not really worrying about it is that I would lose track of how many that I had, although I would say I never had 40. But what would happen is eventually I would start sort of going through the bags and boxes and whatever in my closets and realize that I had completely forgotten about some of the works that I had in progress. So my thinking when I'm working through a works in progress pile and trying to figure out where to start and how to make progress on it is to kind of mentally inventory in two ways. One is, are there any works in progress that are close to being finished? And I've learned to pay attention to that because a few years ago, I was working on a shawl and I set it aside with a sort of thought that I still had a lot to do on it. And 6 months later, I picked it up and sat down with it and realized that actually I only had 2 more rows to finish on it. And so I felt like a bit of an idiot for having set it aside for so long. So I've been kind of mentally inventorying and prioritizing a little bit as I go along. But yeah, I needed to sit down before the fall starts. I felt like this is a good time to do that and figure out, okay, where are we exactly? The pile has accumulated a little bit, and I have a total of 13 works in progress. So I broke those down into categories. So first off, 3 of those are blankets. And so because those are blankets, I kind of set the blankets aside, right? I think of blankets as long-term projects that don't really have a deadline, and none of the blankets that I currently have are anywhere close to being finished. Okay, so 13 works in progress, 3 blankets, which are long-term projects, so I'm not going to worry about those. A shawl, and this is the West Knits Scrappy shawl that I started, and I made a lot of headway on it, and I'm very happy with it, but I'm now in that sort of borderland of a Stephen West shawl project where the rows are extremely long, and so that has gotten set aside. And so I sort of have to think about, you know, where I want to factor that in, because in some ways I think of that as almost like a small blanket, right? A lot of Stephen West shawls are known as schlankets for that reason. I have also 2 sock projects on the go, and so I'm bumping those up near the top of the list of things that I want to finish before I embark on my fall knitting, because in both cases I have, I think I'm at the heel of both of the first sock of each of these 2 sock projects, right? So like 40-50% of the way through on each of those. So I feel like those can kind of move up to the top of the queue as something that I might be able to finish. Okay? I have a cardigan that I started a long time ago. I'm making it with Rowan denim yarn, which is a cotton yarn, which is a little bit rough on my hands. And so I actually finished a sleeve of it. And I think I started a second sleeve, but this is a project that I have not picked up for a very long time. And so I think I'm probably going to leave it sitting for a little bit longer. I know that, yeah, I think I'm going to wait on that one a little bit. And one of the reasons I'm going to wait on that is because I also have 4 sweaters in progress. And full confession, the only reason I have 4 sweaters is because over the weekend I decided that I wanted to cast on Andrea Mowry's Ooey Gooey Rhinebeck sweater, even though there's really little to no chance that I'm going to Rhinebeck this year. I just really liked the pattern, and it was a chance to use some yarn from Stash and use some hand spun, and so I did it. And so that's the other thing I would say, is that, you know, I at times will have certain limits in mind of, you know, okay, you have a lot of works in progress. How are we doing on those? But I generally don't set myself a real hard and fast rule saying, no, you're not allowed to cast on anything new until you do, you know, these other projects, young lady, right? I don't enjoy taking that tone with myself. And that also brings out my defiant streak, in which I feel like, okay, fine, I'll cast on 4 more projects, right? I'm the boss of me. I'm not saying it's rational. You know, if I find myself really wanting to start a cast on, then I start a cast on. I cast on a new project. One of the things I think that, you know, maybe as knitters and crocheters and fiber artists we have to keep in mind is that, you know, the kind of muddy middle of any project is always like a challenge, right? So you always start with a lot of momentum. You usually finish with a lot of momentum, although we've probably all had some knitting projects where, you know, we kind of crawled across the finish line and thought, thank God that's over, right? But for the most part, the beginning and ends of projects are usually points where you have a lot of speed. But the middle portion is always a challenge. And the middle portion is always where you lose momentum. And so I offer that to say that I try to give myself grace, right, when I'm in the middle of a project, that until it gets to a certain tipping point, it may feel like it's slow going. But all this to say, right, that a bunch of the projects that I have are kind of in that murky middle. And then the last 2 things that I have are the Stella quilt cushions. So those are kind of household item. And so the plan was to make 3 of those. I finished 2 of the fronts of those, and so I still have to finish another front of those and do the backs, and then stuff them and seam them and finish them. So I feel like, along with the socks, the quilt cushion, the Stella cushions are something that I definitely like to get done over the next few weeks. And that's because the other project that I have is a vest project. And that is something that I'm working on for the Master Hand Knitter certification process that I'm working on. And I've started that, but I'm not sure I'm happy with the yarn color choice, so to be continued on that. So the 4 sweaters. There's one sweater that, you know, when I'm being honest with myself, I haven't worked on it for a very long time. It's a lace construction. It's called Orchid. It's by Marie Wallen. So it's a complicated pattern. And I started it during a Marie Wallen knit along that was probably at least a year ago now, maybe 2. And I like the pattern and I like the potential sweater, but it's kind of thing that, right, there's no way you can just work on it while binging Netflix. It's something where you've really got to pay attention to the pattern that's in front of you. And so I've had it sitting off to the side thinking, oh, well, no, I don't want to undo that because it took so much time to do, and yeah, I'll get back to it. But I feel like at this point, to be realistic, I have to frog that. Right? And so that's what I plan to do after this video or shortly thereafter. And I think that will at least eliminate one of the sweaters that are there. Okay, so if you've been following along, then this is having tallied up everything that I still have to do. This is what I've decided to do to tackle the works in progress that have kind of built up on me. So I have a total of 13 works in progress, and 3 of those are blankets. So those are going to stay in the back burner. Right, those are just, they have no firm deadline. They're something that I definitely want to be working on, and I'm gonna think through how to kind of work on those maybe a little bit later. Right, so that leaves me 10 works in progress basically that I need to tackle. The cardigan that I worked on, the Lizzie cardigan, that's gonna go on the back burner with the blankets. Right, so that brings it down to 9, and the Stephen West shawl is going to also go on the back burner with the blankets, so that brings it down to 8. I'm going to frog the Marie Wallen sweater, and so that will bring me down to 7. 2 of those are socks, right? So those are going to go to the top of the heap as something that I could be working on, maybe doing like a 30 minutes a day to make progress on both of those. The master hand knitter project, the vest, that needs to stay towards the top of the work in progress pile and needs to be something that I'm working on. And in general, the completion of the master hand knitter certification process level 2 is something that is top of my list for this fall. 3 remaining sweaters that I have to do. I have a Beagle by Nora Gone that I'm working on, and that's a present for someone, so that I want to have done by Christmas at the latest, so that's going to stay in the active work in progress pile. The Ooey Gooey sweater that I cast on is now at the point where I finished the yoke, and so that is just going to be stockinette stitch in the round and something that I can kind of work on like while watching TV, while reading, whatever. So that's going to stay in the reasonably active pile as well. The Snowscape sweater that I started, that has color work at the base of the sleeve, and so you knit the sleeves first. So I finished one sleeve on that. I really basically need to just knit the second sleeve on that, and then that will become like the Ooey Gooey sweater, stockinette stitch in the round, right? Forever and a day, and eventually I'll have a nice sweater. So both of those I feel like are ones that can kind of be, you know, something that I'm working on as I go along. And then that I think leaves the Stella quilt cushions, so I think that I'm also going to try to make some progress on those. And so as I'm thinking through what I'm going to be doing, basically that's how I'm sort of breaking it down. So I hope that if you find anything here that's useful or interesting or helpful, that you'll like and subscribe and come back again and again.